Question: what is the difference between Zen Buddhism and Christianity? In order to answer that question, we need to extend Zen Buddhism into general Buddhism and look at the difference between Buddhism and Christianity. In its summary, the major difference between Buddhism and Christianity is the way salvation is attained. For the Buddhist, they'll have to follow the Eightfold Path. And if the Eightfold Path was followed to the T, it will bring peace and it will bring enlightenment to the follower. And it will bring truth to the follower. The Eightfold Path would include the right view, the right intention, the right speech, the right action, the right livelihood, the right effort used, the right awareness, and the right meditation. When a Buddhist does all that, and does all that correctly, then the Buddhist will attain enlightenment or be enlightened. What it means is, to achieve enlightenment for the Buddhist, one would have to do the right things and think the right things. This is in complete contrast to the way Christians achieve salvation. For Christianity is concerned, salvation can only be achieved by grace of God through the faith in what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. And salvation is never and can never be achieved by doing the right things or thinking the right things or even speaking the right things. Here in itself is a complete contrast between Buddhism and Christianity. Now let's have a look at what Zen Buddhism is all about. Zen Buddhism is the most well-known form of Buddhism, particularly in the West. The nature of Zen Buddhism is pantheistic, and depending on how you look at and interpret Zen Buddhism, you can decide either way. One way is that Zen Buddhism is not a philosophical system that is built on any logic or reason, as Zen Buddhism opposes any form of dualistic thinking, and it doesn't hold to any sacred writings. On the other hand, you could look at Zen Buddhism as life in itself, and it encompasses everything, that is the air, the sky, the mountains, the trees, the humans, the animals. It is also very individualistic approach. It is what you teach yourself as the Zen Buddhism guides you to a form of self-revelation. There is no God to worship or become, or any ceremonial rituals or traditions to follow. In a nutshell, Zen Buddhism is living in a self-disciplined life that rejects egocentric notions and desires. A Buddhist's ultimate desire is to achieve nirvana, in short, the state of nothingness. And this blissful enlightenment, existing in a state of nothingness, can come only if the Buddhist can transcend inwardly and become completely detached from ignorance and selfishness. Through the Eightfold Path, one can then find inner peace in self, in your individual inner self, by detaching from worldly desires and worldly influences. So in short, achieving salvation is done through self-efforts. Interestingly, Zen Buddhism is actually a sect within one of the two original branches of Buddhism. The original branch is the Theravada Buddhism, and then you have another sect that call themselves the Mahayana Buddhism. Following the death of its founder Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddhist community split over the issue of the capacity of the layman to reach nirvana. The Theravada school of thought, or the original school of thought, they taught that only monks who sacrificed every amenity of life could qualify for the demands of enlightenment. The Mahayana school fought that notion and presented means by which the average person could reach nirvana through meditation and altruistic acts of kindness. Zen Buddhism came out of this later school of thought, the Mahayana movement. Unlike traditional forms of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism emphasizes deep and laborious meditation over the search for knowledge. And Zen Buddhism is an intensely subjective form of Buddhism in which the individual finds truth apart from any adherence to books or to any sacred text or the revealed knowledge of the Pali Canon. Zen Buddhism does not adhere to sacred texts as do other forms of Buddhism. The teacher is considered eminent. Chanting is a form of meditation, and Zen Buddhism emphasized this much more than any other forms of Buddhism. Practitioners chant major texts of Buddhism, but often they would repeat the names of past Zen masters in the hope of reaching the Zen master's respective levels. An added complication about Zen Buddhism is that it often amalgamates the folk religion practices of various countries that the Zen Buddhism is in. In the West, the attraction of Zen Buddhism sits enormously popular due to its vague principles of non-theistic stance, and this sits quite nicely with the current secular movement of self-exaltation. What is even more interesting is that Zen Buddhism is viewed with suspicion by the traditional Buddhist in both the Theravada and the Mahayana forms of Buddhism. Given all this, you can now see and contrast the difference between Zen Buddhism and Christianity.